The news broke like a thunderclap on an otherwise calm Tuesday afternoon. Here in the studio, the teleprompters went blank. Producers' voices crackled in my earpiece, urgent and overlapping. Something unprecedented had just happened. A high-stakes negotiation, years in the making, had just imploded. On one side of the Atlantic, Donald Trump, reportedly furious. On the other, EU officials in Brussels scrambling. The source of this diplomatic earthquake? One man, Mark Carney, former Bowie governor, now climate envoy. He had just walked away from a deal designed to be inescapable. We went live immediately. Sources inside the U.S. delegation have since described it to us as the gilded cage. The deal presented to Carney was designed to look incredibly appealing on the surface. It offered massive U.S. investment in European green tech and a commitment to shared carbon standards. But the devil, as always, was in the details. Buried deep within the annexes of the agreement were clauses that would have given U.S. corporations unprecedented power to challenge European environmental regulations. One particularly insidious clause, Article 117b, would have allowed American companies to sue EU governments in private arbitration courts if their climate policies were deemed to harm corporate profits. It was a backdoor that would effectively gut the very sovereignty the EU was trying to protect. The deal was a gilded cage, beautiful on the outside, but once you entered, the door would lock behind you, and you would be trapped by American corporate interests. The strategy was brilliant in its cynicism. It was crafted to be politically impossible to refuse, had ensured the deal was leaked to the press in broad, glowing terms weeks in advance. European Green parties were hailing it as a breakthrough. Industry leaders were preparing for a boom. If Carney rejected it, he would be painted as the man who killed the planet's best hope for a climate accord. The U.S. team, guided by the Trump playbook, counted on this. He's a banker, a U.S. official said. Bankers always take the deal. They fundamentally misread the man. Mark Carney was not your typical bureaucrat. Former governor, Bank of Canada, former governor, Bank of England. He had stared down financial crises. This negotiation was his legacy project, his chance to pivot and tackle the greatest existential threat. He invested years traveling. He worked years building consensus for a global climate framework. Political blowback would be immediate and severe. He would be accused of arrogance. He would be accused of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. His reputation, pragmatist. His reputation, deal maker. They expected he'd choose a flawed deal over no deal. Bankers always take the deal. They saw the pragmatist. They missed the strategist. Carney's pragmatism served core principles. Entering the final negotiation room in Geneva, the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sources, team worked through the night, 72 hours of work, wargaming every possible scenario. They found the poison pills hidden in the text. Signing would be a short-term win. Signing would be a long-term catastrophe for European sovereignty. He was preparing to make the most consequential decision of his career. The atmosphere in the Geneva conference room was thick with tension. On one side sat the U.S. delegation, confident and relaxed. On the other side sat Mark Carney and his small team of advisors. The lead U.S. negotiator, a man known for his aggressive tactics, slid the final document across the polished mahogany table.
Mark, this is a historic moment for us all. A win for the U.S., a win for the EU, a win for the planet. We just need your signature to make it official.
All eyes turned to Carney. Carney did not pick up the pen. Instead, he looked directly at the lead negotiator. He let the silence hang in the air for a long, uncomfortable moment.
Thank you for the offer. My team and I have reviewed it in its entirety. We have studied every clause, every annex, every footnote. And on behalf of the European Union and its member states, the answer is no.
The word hung in the air, sharp and absolute. The U.S. negotiator's smile vanished.
No? Mark, I don't think you understand. This is the final offer. There is no plan B. This deal is on the table today and today only. You walk away from this, you walk away from everything.
Carney's expression did not change.
Oh, I understand perfectly. I understand that this is not a partnership, it's a cage. You are not offering a deal, you are demanding a surrender. You are asking us to trade our long-term sovereignty for a short-term political victory. We will not do that. The proposal is fundamentally unbalanced and unacceptable.
With that, Carney pushed his chair back from the table. He stood up, followed by his team. The U.S. delegation was frozen in a state of collective disbelief.
This is a grave mistake, Mark. President Trump will not forget this.
Carney paused at the door and looked back.
That is a risk we are prepared to take. We are ready to negotiate a fair and equitable treaty. We are not prepared to sign a suicide pact.
And then he walked out, leaving behind a stunned room, a worthless document, the wreckage of a carefully laid trap. The news of Carney's refusal hit Brussels like a seismic shock. In the corridors of the European Commission, officials who had been preparing for a victory celebration were suddenly thrust into crisis mode. Phones began ringing incessantly. High-level meetings were hastily convened. The initial reaction was not admiration, it was sheer panic.
He did what? Is he insane? He had no mandate to walk away completely?
Not to detonate the entire process. For a few frantic hours, chaos reigned. There was a genuine fear that Carney had gone rogue, a lone actor who had just plunged the EU into a diplomatic crisis with its most important ally. Some leaders immediately feared the economic fallout. As Carney's team began disseminating their analysis of the deal's hidden clauses, specifically the sovereignty-destroying Article 117b, the mood in Brussels began to change. Panic slowly gave way to a grudging understanding, and then to a quiet sense of fury. They realized they hadn't just been outmaneuvered. They had been profoundly disrespected. The United States hadn't seen them as a partner, but as a mark. The realization dawned that Carney hadn't scuttled a good deal. He had saved them from a catastrophic one. He hadn't been a rogue agent, he had been their guardian. By late evening, a new consensus was forming. The Commission President, after a series of tense calls with key national leaders like the German Chancellor and the French President, prepared a statement. It was a masterpiece of diplomatic recalibration. It expressed regret that the current proposal was unbalanced, but praised Carney for his principled stand and affirmed the EU's commitment to a fair and equitable partnership with the United States. In the space of about 8 hours, the EU went from panic and disarray to a unified, defiant posture. They were scrambling, yes, but they were now scrambling to get behind Carney, not to undermine him. In the immediate aftermath, the diplomatic fallout was severe. Communication channels between Washington and Brussels went cold. The United States administration, publicly humiliated, released a terse statement blaming European intransigence for the collapse of the talks. Behind the scenes, the fury was palpable. Former President Trump had seen the deal as a way to reassert his influence on the global stage. He took to his social media platform.
The weak EU and their foolish negotiator Carney just rejected the greatest climate deal in history. They are weak and incompetent. There will be consequences. Sad.
This was more than just a failed negotiation. It was a public slap in the face. The incident drew a new, sharp fault line in transatlantic relations. Carney's move shattered that status quo. He had essentially called the American bluff. He exposed the confrontational, zero-sum approach that underpinned the United States strategy. Other nations were watching closely, particularly those who often find themselves in unequal negotiations with superpowers. Carney's refusal sent a powerful message. It is possible to say no. It demonstrated that a well-prepared, principled stand could defeat a strategy of pure power play and intimidation. Diplomats from countries in South America, Africa, Southeast Asia quietly expressed admiration for the move.
Carney gave us a masterclass. He showed that you don't have to sign a deal that sells out your future.
This single act of defiance has fundamentally altered the landscape of global diplomacy. It has demonstrated the limits of deal-trap diplomacy and may embolden other nations to push back against similar tactics from larger powers. Here in Washington, the mood among foreign policy analysts is one of stunned reappraisal.
The Trump playbook has always relied on the opponent's fear of a vacuum. The assumption is that a bad deal is always better than no deal. Carney didn't just reject the deal, he rejected the entire premise. He chose the vacuum. It's a paradigm shift, and frankly, Washington's foreign policy establishment doesn't know how to react to it.
On the ground in Brussels, our correspondent Melissa Bell has been speaking with EU officials off the record.
We were caught flat-footed, I won't lie. Our initial modeling was based on Carney securing concessions, not torching the whole negotiation. But his analysis was correct. The deal was poison. He forced us to look in the mirror and decide if we were a true union or just a collection of markets to be exploited. In a strange way, this crisis has forged a stronger resolve here than I've seen in years.
We also have a voice from the business community, which had been lobbying heavily for the deal.
This is a disaster. Carney let ideology get in the way of a landmark business opportunity. Billions in investment, thousands of jobs, all gone because of a few tricky clauses that could have been litigated later.
Finally, we turn to a veteran diplomat, Sir Richard Clarke, former United Kingdom ambassador to the United Nations.
What we witnessed was a classic case of asymmetric negotiation. The United States used its raw power to set a trap. Carney used the power of principle and forensic detail to dismantle it. It reminds me of the Cold War, where a single principled stand could alter the entire strategic calculation. Carney wasn't just negotiating a climate deal, he was defending the very idea of a rules-based international order. It was a brave and, I believe, a historically significant move.
So, where do we go from here? The immediate future is uncertain and fraught with risk. In the short term, the biggest loser is the climate. The collapse of these talks creates a vacuum where urgent action is needed. The G20 summit next week, which was supposed to be a forum for celebrating a historic accord, will now be an arena for tense damage control. The immediate winner, paradoxically, might be European sovereignty. By refusing to walk into the trap, the EU has asserted its identity as a political bloc that cannot be bullied, setting a crucial precedent for future negotiations on all fronts: tech regulation, defense. The big question now rests with Washington. Does the United States administration and the powerful Trump wing of the party double down on this aggressive strategy? Doing so would likely lead to a protracted trade and diplomatic conflict with Europe, potentially pushing the EU into closer alignment with other global powers. Or does this stunning failure prompt a moment of reflection? A recognition that coercion has its limits? The next move from the United States will signal its intentions for the global order. Will it seek to dominate or to partner? The world is waiting for the answer. For Mark Carney, his legacy is now cemented, though perhaps not in the way he intended. He may not be the architect of a grand climate deal, but he has become the icon of principled resistance. He has shown that the most powerful move in a negotiation is sometimes the willingness to walk away.